Those of you who follow my channel know that I don't do many restorations. But I came across this Yatming Chevrolet 1003, which is a Chevy Astro 1 concept car. And it's obviously pretty beat to hell. And I thought I'd give it a shot at restoring it. Just seemed like something different, something fun. When I went into this, I thought I had metal cast green paint on hand, and unfortunately I didn't, so that changes part of the direction this will go. This little casting was a turd. It just fought me every step of the way. It has a metal body, and it's one of those rubberized plastic bases. It's funky, and I didn't like it. But I suffered through it. It has two posts, obviously. I drill out the posts. The posts weren't easy to drill out. The base, actually part of it came apart on me as I was trying to get it out of there. It just wasn't, it didn't start off well, but I think it finishes okay. And you'll get to see if you agree with me on that or not. Wow, it's weird. The drill looks like it's going backward in that picture. Anyhow, hadn't noticed that until now. It wasn't. But I got it drilled out. I got this funky base out of it, and it had a little piece of plastic that kept the wheels in place. And so there you have the metal casting itself, and some of that junk on the back just scraped off. I threw it in citrus strip, and there's the result of that. And went over it with the wire wheel and stuff, and it doesn't look that bad right there. And then I thought, well, I'm going to polish it to put the metal cast on. And it looked like hell when I polished it. There was all kinds of spotting on the casting, really rough spots. I was going for a restoration, but it was really fighting me. It's one of those things where I wish I had tried zinc plating before, and I'm going to have to give that a shot one of these days. I just need to get a roll of the zinc and go at it. But what I decided to do was just to go over this, obviously, with the Scotch-Brite pad that you see there, sanded down. I wasn't trying to get rid of the casting lines as much as I was trying to clean up the casting. Trying to get rid of those spots, I lost some of the detail, which was unfortunate. But one of the things I also lost was some of the casting lines. See, I tried polishing it a little bit more, and it just wasn't working out. So I decided, okay, well, I'm just going to hit this thing with metal cast base coat, that silver base coat that usually gives you a good result. And so after I tried polishing this, that's what I ended up doing. Now the glass, it looked good when it was in the casting, even though it was a little crooked. But I'm pointing out that there's two cracks in the glass that I didn't see before. So I had to be exceptionally careful with it. I went over it with 2500 grit sandpaper because there was just a lot of pitting. But at the same time, I wanted to be really careful because if I accidentally, there's already cracks in it. If they came apart, I couldn't get a replacement glass for this. So then I'd really be scrambling. So I took it easy on that, sanded it as much as I thought it would tolerate. Then I went over it with flitz, polished it up with that. And, flitz always helps. It's excellent at this kind of thing. And so, I just applied it with my finger and then buffed it out. And the results, they're good, but then it was time for gauzy. And that really added a shine to it. Unfortunately, some of the pitting is still there. Gauzy isn't going to totally hide that. It will put that layer of gloss over it that really helps. It's definitely far better with the gauzy than without it. But again, it's going to be far from perfect. The wheels, I was keeping the wheels because, again, I was doing a restoration of sorts. And so I used Citadel Nuln Oil. The first thing I hit there, in case you're curious, was the steering wheel. I washed the interior. I wasn't changing the color of the interior. But it was weird. It had like a little funky area on it that stayed white, even though it's a black steering wheel, when I tried to clean it. And so I thought, well, I'll just hit it with Nuln Oil. And that's what I did here again. Nuln Oil is essentially a black wash. And then I went over what used to be chrome. I restored that using the Molotow pen. And this truly is where I got to see that the 2mm Molotow pen, it truly shines in this situation. Trying to do this with the 1mm pen would have been so much more difficult. You're trying basically to draw the lines with the 1mm pen, or with the 2mm pen, you're just really going over the detail with a much wider point, and it's just far easier to do. And this is a real, for me, it was one of those shining examples of, gee, you did the right thing getting that 2mm pen and not just waiting until the 1mm ran out. So, I ended up, after that, you see I'm putting it together now, and there you see the glass. I did use the Bondic resin pin to hold that glass in place because it appeared to be made wrong. It kind of wanted to ride side saddle in there. It didn't want to sit right. And in the original casting, before I took it apart, there was a gap in the glass because of how it was situated in there. So I used the resin pin just to hold this in place. But I ended up, since I didn't have the metal cast green, I still had some of that Krylon stained glass summer green paint. That I used that on a build last weekend, I think it was, in fact. Maybe almost a week and a half now. But I put it on heavier to get a darker green than I had before. And, after that, I go over it with the Minwax polyurethane gloss clear. That I'm a believer in that. It works exceptionally well for me. So I put this little guy back together. I did hit the base with a coat of Rust-Oleum Matte Black, just to freshen it. As you can see there, as I mentioned before, part of the base did crack on me. I ended up gluing that back together, and then when I hit it with the black paint, you can't even tell that there was any damage to it. I did use self-tapping screws on here. And there you kind of see how it turned out. The green is not perfect compared to the original green, but for me it's acceptable. So there's where we started. As you can see, it's a darker green on the original. But that poor little thing was beat to hell. Somebody had a lot of fun with it, and then they must have thrown it in the yard and stepped on it, let the dog bury it, and Lord only knows. But here's where we ended up. I did adjust it a little so it sits a little bit lower as well than the original. But I'm pretty happy with the results. That stained glass paint is pretty interesting. Seems to work pretty well. This is far from a perfect restoration. But, it's definitely in better shape than it was. And looking at it does make me smile. This was fun. There's some glamour shots coming up of this one. And I do show the paints that I use. There's the metal cast base coat, the Krylon stained glass, and the Minwax fast drying poly. You can still see the cracks in the glass, and the pitting. But it's not nearly as bad as it originally was. So I hope you guys like this build. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons. Thank you so much for your support. And Thanks everybody for watching. Catch you in the next one.